disillusioned soldier deserter finds an officer's uniform and begins to dominate, forming his own unit and carrying out executions. The events of this black and white movie, based on a true story, begin in April 1945, 2 weeks before Germany's surrender. The protagonist, Willi Herold, a private deserter, runs along a country road while a truck full of cheerful Germans chases him, an orchestra playing in the back, and the captain, drinking schnapps straight from the bottle, shoots at the fleeing criminal. Luck favors Herold as he reaches the forest where the truck cannot follow, hiding from his pursuers like a hobbit from the Lord of the Rings. Later, at an abandoned railroad station, he finds a blanket and makes a makeshift bag. There he meets another deserter, exhausted but armed. After resting, they sneak into a farmhouse at night. A gallows with a sign that reads, "Looting is punishable by death," hangs from a tree nearby. The warning doesn't stop them. In the barn, Willi steals chicken eggs directly from under the hens, while his partner stands over the sleeping watchman with a stone in his hand. The disturbed chickens make a noise, waking the watchman. Willi tells his partner to kill the watchman, but he simply runs away. The guard screams and lunges at Herold, who pushes him, causing the watchman to hit his head on the bricks. Willi then sees the farmers, awakened by the noise, stabbing his accomplice with pitchforks. Not wanting to end up hanging from a tree, the former private escapes. He makes his way along the railroad tracks past a small town on a country road. Willi finds an abandoned car, and inside, along with a box of apples, he discovers a box containing a Luftwaffe captain's uniform. He hastily changes into the uniform, which fits him except for the slightly too large pants. Overjoyed by his luck, Willi even puts on a little act, pretending to be an officer, when another deserter, Private Freitag, stumbles upon him, mistaking him for a real captain. He reports that he has been separated from his unit and asks to serve under Herold's command. To start, he offers to pull out a car stuck in the mud. The rogue readily accepts the role and begins to act like a commander, especially since he has little choice. When the private frees the car, they drive together to the city. On the way, the newly appointed captain discreetly throws out his old clothes to prevent his subordinate from suspecting anything. In the evening, they arrive at an inn. The locals are not too friendly to the military. The war is nearly lost. Soldiers are deserting in droves, robbing the locals. Herold uses this animosity to his advantage. He begins interviewing the locals about the damage caused by deserters so that the government will pay compensation. This finds a warm response from the locals, and even the innkeeper feeds them dinner. However, Freitag's veracity arouses the innkeeper's suspicion, thinking they might be the same deserters forced to starve on the road. Only Herold's restraint and skill keep the ruse alive, but by night the locals test him. They bring a captured thief under the window and demand he deal with him. Without flinching, Herold shoots the thief in the head. In the morning, they go to the farm where Willi had stolen eggs. The three fugitives have already taken over the place, sitting the corpses of their less fortunate colleagues on a sofa, taunting the owners and looting supplies. Herold's commanding presence and authoritative voice allow him to take control of the situation. He enlists the robbers into his squad. One of them notices that the captain's pants are clearly too big, but keeps this observation to himself. Loaded with supplies, the squad sets off. They encounter two soldiers rolling an anti-aircraft gun, and having no better options, they join the group. When the car runs out of fuel, the soldiers have to drag it along with the cannon, which eventually leads to escalating personal animosities. A fascist-powered convertible overtakes a military police truck. Harsh men check documents, ready to open fire at any sign of disobedience. Herold must show great acting talent to convince the officer that his authority is higher, claiming even the Führer himself sent him to the rear to check the situation. Believing the fraud, the military takes them to prison camps holding deserters and marauders. On the way, the same officer who shot at the fleeing Herold earlier drops them off, but doesn't recognize him in his new uniform. The captain explains that keeping prisoners during such a difficult time for the country is an unacceptable luxury. He, as a special appointee of the Führer, could help solve this problem bypassing bureaucratic red tape and legal delays. A court-martial is needed to sentence the prisoners, but while Willi contemplates this, his squad needs food and lodging. Camp manager Schutte shows Herold the prisoner's barracks and updates him. During the interrogation, Willi's subordinates beat a prisoner, taking valuable items from others. Private Freitag believes this is wrong and asks the captain to stop the lawlessness, but Willi remarks that these people are doomed anyway. Meanwhile, the manager talks to Chief of Court officials Hansen, who controls prisoner handling. Schutte asks Hansen to deliver a parcel to a prisoner from his daughter, a right she earned through labor. Hansen agrees but pockets it himself. Herold informs Schutte that he will hold courts-martial, allowing for the execution of prisoners. Some have already been killed, 2 shot, 3 beaten to death. This infuriates the justice officer, who reports Schutte and Herold's arbitrariness to his superiors. They cleverly claim the prisoners attacked the officer during interrogation, but the situation is dangerous. The superiors might check Herold's credentials and discover he isn't a Führer's appointee. Schutte, wanting to conclude all affairs in the camp, calls his superiors to get Gestapo approval for Captain Herold to conduct simplified military field trials, bypassing the Ministry of Justice. If Willi agrees to take full responsibility, they can proceed. Upon receiving permission, Schutte informs Hansen's superiors, who essentially allow them to continue without him. The justice officer receives a call from above and sees that the camp officials are already solving the problem. Prisoners are digging a large hole at the edge of the forest. Schutte leads a group of 30 prisoners out of the barracks. They march, chanting even as they're trapped in the hole. Herold orders an anti-aircraft cannon to be brought up and the prisoners are shot, their bodies torn apart. After the first round, some survivors try to escape, but the soldiers, reloading the cannon, open fire again. Realizing the horror of his actions, Willi wants to scream but holds his composure, knowing that if his deception is exposed, he'll face the same fate. When the anti-aircraft gun jams, the personnel finish off the survivors with handguns. Only Freitag abstains from the execution. After a brief dinner, the firing squad returns to their duties. Freitag stands aside, but when moans are heard from a wounded man in the pit, the captain orders the clerk to end his suffering, which he reluctantly does. Herold and Schutte shoot 90 prisoners in just one day. Hansen reports this to his superiors when he hears swearing outside the window. The remaining prisoners refuse to bury the bodies. The officer orders the soldiers to bury the grave themselves. As they cover the bodies with lime, some of the executed are still alive, but not for long. In the mess hall, the personnel celebrate a successful operation, praising Captain Herold. The guests enjoy the performance of 2 artists from among the prisoners, whose repertoire is filled with toilet humor. Together with the officers, they also perform a hymn to the fighting brotherhood. While the soldiers are having fun with banal and commonplace brawls, the officers engage in small talk with the entertainers. Willi wants to know why the talented men were imprisoned, but they won't admit it. He then proposes a game, asking everyone to imagine they are all thieves. He himself, for example, stole an officer's uniform. The guests, taking his veiled confession as a joke, learn that the artist stole from a dead comrade. This enrages Schutte, but he is distracted by the rampaging soldiers. The fight spills into the street and becomes a mass brawl. However, after blowing off steam, the instigators fraternize and decide to beat up the prisoners who had refused to bury the grave earlier. The officers notice the beating and order them to stop, but Herold's subordinates ignore him, forcing him to improvise to maintain his authority in front of the camp manager. First, he fires a pistol over the ear of an offending soldier, stunning him momentarily. Then he lines up the beaten prisoners and binds them together with a rope. When the prisoners attempt to escape, Willi shoots one in the back, and the others drag their fallen comrade. Herold hands the gun to one of the performers and tells him to do the same. The performer kills the second prisoner, but his stage colleague shoots himself in the head instead of following the order. The captain waits for the artist to raise his gun. With one less fugitive, the target drags 3 bodies behind him at once. Schutte's wife takes his gun and starts firing. Everyone joins in the shooting. A dozen bullets sink into the exhausted body before it falls into the mud. In the morning, Freitag notices that Herold's pants are too long for his height, but he says nothing considering the circumstances. Schutte approaches the tent. The scouring party is ready to search the area for deserters. The captain comes out in his tunic and underpants, which doesn't prevent him from giving a rousing speech and sending everyone off. With no locals around, Herold's squad has a feast of drunken dancing and mocking the prisoners. Schutte and his men return to find the camp deserted, with dead bodies lying around. The captain's drunken men emerge from the kitchen, and he himself is barely on his feet. Then the mess hall explodes, killing all those who didn't manage to leave. British artillery hits the area, leveling the camp. The Allied Air Force sends a big TNT salute to the Germans. After the air raid, a wobbly Herold picks up his cap and coat from the ground. He commands the survivors to line up. It's time to get out of this hospitable place. Along with the deserters, a couple of prisoners survive. The captain tells them to find their military uniforms. The title informs the viewer that the only thing left of this camp is the barrier post, and everything else has turned to dust. It shows a color picture of the place as it is today. The group travels to town in a car with the words "Herold Speedy Trial" written on the side. Their fraudulent plans resemble a crew of Antelope New from the Golden Calf. Only unlike the Great Combinator, the captain does not honor the penal code. Dashing through the streets, they stop near the city hall, where a white flag with the inscription "Welcome" hangs, as the local government prepares to greet the approaching allies. The soldiers immediately execute the mayor who steps out the door at the wrong time. After requisitioning provisions, Herold heads to the best house in town. Here, the deserters throw a raucous party, but then a woman arrives and spoils it all. One of the loyal underlings brazenly steals from the captain's attractive maid of honor, and payback follows quickly. No sooner had the lovebirds secluded themselves in a room than the insolent underling, who forgot about the subordination and the right of the first night, is dragged off by his former co-workers to cool his ardor in the bathroom. Willi enters the vacated room and takes off his tunic. Soon he judges the troublemaker who dared to question who is the alpha male, accusing him of looting, betrayal of country, and other common offenses for the squadron. The captain passes a death sentence. In the courtyard, the private is stripped naked and told to run. He walks a few steps before a volley of rifles cuts short his sinful life. After that, Herold and his men organize a party with songs and dances, half-naked girls, and waterfalls of alcohol. After such an event in the morning, they are lying anywhere and everywhere. That's how the military police find and arrest them. Pretending to be captain, Willi tries to eat his documents, but the police manage to save some of them. The documents reveal in plain German that he's just a private. Despite his many crimes at the trial, Herold is offered parole instead of the death penalty. He proved himself a savvy guy with an iron grip, resourcefulness, and the manners of a true officer. Instead of hanging, he is sent to the front line, which he gladly agrees to. Later, he escapes with the help of a rope made of bound sheets. The former captain wanders through a forest littered with skeletons, literally walking on bones. Before disappearing into the impenetrable gloom, the final credits tell of his fate. On May 23, 1945, Willi Herold was arrested, and a year and a half later, on November 14, 1946, he and 6 accomplices were executed by court order for war crimes. At the time, he was 21 years old.